Alright, and so it begins. We're going to cast and do some analysis on this episode of Welcome to LittleWarGame between two players. Down here in the bottom left-hand side, we have AlphaZerton, who we're going to be focusing on for the first rendition, and up in the top right-hand side, we have the therx. So, we're going to speed things along a little bit. But first, I want you to note that AlphaZerton here has put the house down in this location. We're going to pause and so you can see why. This map, Pripet Marshes, is really good for Beast, and there are a number of things that favor that. First, look at the main. Main is choked off, very hard to get access into, but you can easily get air access, especially if the game, if we zoom out a little bit, you'll understand. You see the main base here, there's an secondary base here, and the third is either here or here, but if we get to Beast and we have dragons, then bouncing between this main base and this potential third base, or more likely fourth base, and bouncing between this natural and this third base over here becomes much easier because the ground distance between those bases is much more expansive than the air distance. Also, look at this natural. How do you wall this? Not easily, not quickly, and not well. No combination or placement positioning of house, barracks, castle will efficiently wall this off. Even if we consider something ludicrous, like putting the castle not in its normal default location of roughly here, but putting it all the way over here and making it part of the wall, you've still successfully blocked off the natural, not the main base. This means that if you're going up against an opponent who has a 2-den, you just accept that you're going to die and lose the game. Now, as a meta play, you might consider doing that, but if you're playing your own ranked games, don't consider it. It's just very dangerous. Exceptionally skilled players, most of the time when they do that, are doing it as mind games against one another. So the house right here is a good position for AlphaZerton, because he is going to want to go and get a wolf's den as soon as possible. We already talked about what makes Beast really good. Just the difficulty of setting up your natural expansion makes a 1-den expand very efficient, because the one wolf can go out and scout. It can also come back and help defend quite easily. The reason for the house being here gives us two advantages. The first is that it is physically close to where the starting workers are. We're going to peek over here at the therx. You see that this takes a little more effort to get over to. The other benefit is that it doesn't create any kind of wall. So if the game does get to the point where there are enemy units in his base, they can't abuse a naturally made wall to impact the game. Also, this forward location over here for the wolf's den means that AlphaZerton is going to be able to reinforce this defensive area much more easily. For contrast, we'll go over here to the therx. This is the kind of thing, it's not really the therx, but it's a pseudonym. So, in contrast, for the therx, I actually don't like this house and this den placement at all. If you were going up because he's choosing not to 2-den, if you were going up against someone who, for some reason, was going barracks on this map, and it did get to a stage of drops, or soldiers were able to get into this area, there would be a high possibility of them inefficiently taking a fight, that is, the therx and his beast units. Also, notice the location over here for the wolf's den. If he gets surrounded, he can't easily fall back to the natural safety and comfort of his worker line, because the workers are actually obstructed from helping because of this house right here. Now, AlphaZerton's den is much farther away, but one den out in the corner like this will actually help him defensively later on, so it's a gamble that makes sense for now. Whereas this really right here doesn't make as much sense. The therx could have put his house one tile down here, and he would have gotten the corner that he wanted right here, and could have put the den over here, for example, if he was concerned about a wall, leaving an area just this large. Unless he plans on making werewolves out of it. But we're not at that point in the game yet. Alright, so AlphaZerton goes ahead and throws down the wolf. He's going to be a little bit faster because there's more talking than action going on at the moment. And the therx is losing the APM war of texting. So the wolf is going to go out here. This is a very standard location for the first wolf to go. He's going to see if an expansion is being started right away. This gives you two bits of information. If the wolf goes out and it scouts a soldier right away, and another one following, you know that there's a 2-rex. If it sees another wolf popping out, then you know, in fact, that, oh, they actually miss each other here. But you would know, oh, okay, that's what I'm going up against, especially if it's a 2-den. And there you go. That quick peek there is all that's necessary with this worker to see that, oh, you're trying to expand. And at this point, AlphaZerton knows that he's a little bit ahead in a meaningful sense. So first off, another takeaway is that if you're on Pripet Marshes and you're sending the wolf to scout, the wolves will naturally miss each other if you send them from default locations. I would say roughly like here, or here, or sometimes you see a second and third den thrown here. If those units naturally come out, they're unmicroed, red side will always go underneath and then up to the natural expansion, whereas blue side will always come over top and down. Just as a natural matter of course. So if you want to get that little bit extra of efficiency or mind game your opponent a little bit, make sure if your red side to move up and over, and if your blue side to move down and left. Now, the reason AlphaZerton can be confident he's a little bit ahead is that when he did this quick poke right here, you could, I think you could put the castle right here. Or here. I think I could just barely be mistaken, but it's not as efficient because you want the workers to be held back and mining in this general direction, and you want the castle, at least at some point in the game, to play a part in a defensive strategy and as act, even if at a distance, as part of your wall. Now, knowing the fact that he got his own castle out first, he has seen the enemy wolf, which has to be the first wolf just because of the timing, come over here late, means that he's going to be able to defend it. The fact that he saw the worker moving out and no second wolf's den, or more importantly, no third wolf on the way, means that AlphaZerton knows he's not up against a 2-den, and so he can say that with ease that he is at a small advantage. Now over here, this is a good play by fake therx. We're going to call him faux therx. So faux therx over here, you might say, oh, but if he sends the wolf, he can attack this one worker. And while he may get worker damage, those two wolves will certainly kill him before he gets back. And therx doesn't know what level of aggression he's going up against from AlphaZerton. AlphaZerton also has a wolf advantage if faux therx loses this wolf right here. So we're going to get to this part, and I actually like this part. So we're going to see some wolf on wolf micro. So here's the theory of it. When you get into wolf on wolf micro, and you'll see high level and good level players do this quite a bit. What you want to do is you want to make a semi, I believe it's concave. Yeah, concave, because the hole goes in, if that makes sense. Don't take that the wrong way. So you want to form a concave such that when your enemy's units naturally attack in, they'll form a line, and you want them to crash as their horizontal line of moving units up against your vertical wave of defending units. Notice all the damage that this wolf took over here. That's because he was only attacking one of faux therx's wolves, but he was taking attacks from 3 of them at a time. We're going to see some more back and forths go on right over here. See? Yes. Yes, it's all good. Now, while that's going on, we should be seeing a second den pop up sometime in the foreseeable future. Now, this trade is actually fine. I actually think that faux therx got a little bit of the advantage in it, and faux therx also has the high ground, which means that he knows when he's attacking up the hill and his opponent does not. He doesn't attack AlphaZerton moving up over here. If he did, he would be facing off against an opponent who has the same advantage and giving up his own advantage. We're going to go over here, and we're going to see that the Snake Charmer is actually being made. And I think that this is actually a better play overall from AlphaZerton than it is from what therx is going to do. So notice from the earlier game shenanigans that already we would say that AlphaZerton is 1, maybe 1.5 workers ahead, especially if you look at the production, and he is 1 wolf ahead even though no units have been lost. And so that 1 wolf ahead actually means that he is able to scout this probable third much more easily. It's not a concern to him whether or not his opponent is going to be taking the third over here, in addition to the castle requiring to be on this side, which makes it a defensive nightmare even for beast players. This castle is far easier to defend in comparison, even though there are 2 ramps going up. Now we are going to see, because of the rough equivalency and the timing of their builds, AlphaZerton is going to be able to play off of his build with knowledge of what his opponent is doing. So let's talk about that for a second. So AlphaZerton went for 1 wolf's den. Barracks aren't even in this game. And then he built Snake Charmers. Now the importance is that snakes are incredibly high DPS units. and very, very useful. And then he went his second Wolves Den. His opponent seems to have a stronger ground game, faux therx, when he goes one den into expand, although a little later than his opponent, but it's okay because he's got a second and third Wolves Den. So let's theorycraft for a second. In Beast versus Beast, snakes are preferred over wolves, at least right now, and certainly at the time of this recording in this matchup. And so you would think still, because of the gold costs involved, oh, well, 3 wolves dens cost as much as 2 wolves dens and a snake charmer, yet 3 wolves dens provides more, units with more body, wolves have more speed, surely it's not a problem. But the thing is that would ignore what AlphaZerton is capable of. You don't actually need that many wolves. Because of the creation of the snake as a ranged, short range, but ranged beast unit, it's actually possible, because of its high DPS, for you to have a minimum number of wolves capable of blocking up the front line. Once those minimum number, I would say about 5 to 7 on this map, once you have that, you can stack any number of snakes behind it, and snakes are vastly more efficient. Look at all of these ridges. Maybe 8, maybe 10 to 12 wolves. But the rest back here can be snakes, which makes for a very strong defensive posture. Of course, it's over here for our good friend AlphaZerton. AlphaZerton clearly knows what he's doing when he does this, because he is using the buildings he's made, including this first wolves den, to drastically reduce the surface area. Now look at this ledge right here. Compare this defensible area, maybe about 5 wolves, stack the rest on snakes, and about the same right here. Compare those to this area right here. This area would take about 8 wolves, 7 or 8 wolves. This would take 10 to 12 wolves to cover the same surface area. And so actually, faux therx can't just go, even though they have the same build, he cannot go into Wolves Den, Snake Charmer, Wolves Den, because if his opponent, due to his building placement, if his opponent AlphaZerton decided to go for 3 or even 4 Wolves Dens, then the number of wolves and their speed and just the body on them, they have twice the hit points of snakes, would allow AlphaZerton to get this around on faux therx and put his army in a compromising situation. The advantage that AlphaZerton has reached for himself here by reducing the surface area means that he can get snakes, a far more capable defensive unit, and then he is able to go into his choice of tech. Not likely to expand, because he doesn't have quite the number of units to ensure their safety, at least not at this point, and so we're going to go out from there. I just think it's genius, like the small little tweaks that AlphaZerton made. Now these back and forths are very important for both players, and they want to lose as few wolves as possible, although for different reasons. AlphaZerton wants to lose as few wolves as possible because the wolves represent the physical block between his opponent's melee units and his own low range, high DPS units in snakes. And look, just to reconfirm that AlphaZerton is doing the same thing that we were just talking about to reduce the surface area. Faux therx wants to kill wolves for a different reason. Although he doesn't know it yet, by seeing the number of snakes, he can deduce that his opponent is going to be on larger snake count earlier than he is, and thus AlphaZerton has an area or an attack window in which he's much more powerful than his opponent. And so faux therx wants to kill all the ground units he can to make AlphaZerton focus on spending that money on wolves, and thus slowing his ability to move out. Notice how just good, now that we've reached a minimum number of wolves, faux therx is going to get nothing done with these 2 wolves. The best that they can hope for is scouting information at this point. You also see that this has a very real impact on the game itself, so even though there is a 50 gold, I believe that's a wolf, maybe it's the worker from up here, even though there's a worker loss, the overall gold lead is still about 100 over for AlphaZerton, and that's just going to be made a little more apparent as we get into what advantage this actually secures for him. Never mind the utterly massive, remember earlier we were talking about that 1.5 worker and 1 wolf advantage? Being able to scout the location of and the timing of when this third is going to go out means that faux therx rather, is being spied on indirectly. AlphaZerton doesn't need to know what his opponent's den count is or when he's transitioning. The absence of a third base and the sheer stupidity of grabbing the other 4th up here actually gives AlphaZerton all the information he needs to deduce that, hey, faux therx is likely going to be aggressive. Pretty soon we're going to see, because I've cheated and watched this before, we're going to see an animal testing lab go down right about here. This makes perfect sense. Now these move outs right here by AlphaZerton, he already, I don't really think highly of this myself. Let's talk about why. So it's just a little posturing, but I would be surprised if he moves out beyond this area. So faux therx already, without him knowing it, has his possible third being spied on, his level of aggression identified. Because here's the thing, when your macro is sufficiently good, and both players are playing at a substantially high enough level, you can tell what your opponent's build is based on the lack of the number of units they have, or the quantity of what they do have. So AlphaZerton, without maybe even realizing it, although it certainly, if you broke it down, he would be able to explain it, deduced, among Pripet Marshes, it's beast favored. I have a defensive posture and setup. We're both beast. I have his third scouted out. He hasn't started it yet. I have enough gold to start my third, yet I'm going to start teching, and I have a defensive setup. If I find out what the size of my opponent's army is, I can determine what level of aggression is necessary, or what level of defense is necessary. The reason I don't like this move out as much is if you do this move out, now for AlphaZerton it's fine, but if you do this move out, and you push, let's say this is the invisible line. Let's say roughly this is the invisible line. If you move further south than this, further to the right than this, further north than about here, then this small force of wolves actually will negate the defenses that you have procured for yourself and use it against you. They camp right in here or go to attack workers and do a lot of economic damage. So as long as Zerton is being very, very careful, he'll be fine. And there we go. He sees the wolves coming in, and whether he did it because faux therx was attacking in or just because that's what he wanted to do anyways, doesn't particularly matter because it's efficient. Look at how only he needs 2 or 3 wolves to block this area. Now notice this force, even before that pop right there on units, this might be 11. This might have been before that, what? Not much. 8 units, and yet the efficiency of snakes means they don't have anything to worry about in regards to these wolves. As long as they're not being attacked directly, they'll be fine. There we go. There's the animal testing lab going up, and this is the part actually where faux therx is finally starting to get his own snakes into bear, and this is where it's going to be a bit more painful for him. He has to have more wolves than AlphaZerton because his defensive setup isn't as strong, and if AlphaZerton goes for really heavy wolves, he'll just get surrounded and killed. Notice the number of wolves necessary to guard his own snakes versus the 2 to 3 that AlphaZerton was able to block with back in his main. This right here is just some hill posturing and a check to see, okay, you really haven't gone for that inefficient third base, or that really risky third base, we should say. Now here's the other thing. The animal testing lab, we're going to get to crunch some numbers pretty soon. So here's a quick tip for anyone who wants to know. Beast versus beast right now, as of this video, is pretty heavily about snakes, period. Snakes versus snakes are great. Here's the advantages you need to know about. For every 1 armor that you have kept in a 1v1 battle, you keep your snake alive about 1.3 seconds longer. For every 1 attack upgrade you have, you kill your opponent about 0.5, 0.6 seconds faster. So 2 attack upgrades and 1 armor upgrade are roughly analogous in keeping your own units alive. Now, more attack upgrades are better because it allows you to, when you win a fight, you win that fight, and you go kill things, and things die, and that's awesome. But just keep those numbers in mind. It's certainly very useful to think about. So the small number of wolves is actually not a concern because the number of snakes is so large that it's ridiculous. Notice, however, that the faux therx isn't really getting through all of those wolves. He has to have a lot of wolves to protect his own snakes, but that means that AlphaZerton, with a smaller but more efficient army, is more than capable of winning that fight. Not enough to push up the ramp and attack, but certainly more than enough to keep his opponent at bay. Remember what we were saying about locking the base positionings again. I think it's, again, so good. So as armor is getting researched over here, you go AlphaZerton. You knew the point I was going to make and made a game based on the points I had yet to make. You genius, you. So he's scouting the third base here. The repeated posturing means AlphaZerton knows that the fourth base here, or the risky, incredibly risky, playing on your opponent's own intuitions risky third base up here does not exist. This army, as opposed to earlier, where it was a bit of a gamble in this little tedious move out, I think this army serves a lot of purposes. It's denying this base for a very long time. Faux therx will have to push up without vision with inferior snake count, which is just untenable. So his realistic attack path, if he were to try and risk going up against an army that, by the way, is a little bit larger than his and reinforcing quickly, would be to move all the way down here and wrap around. He can't wrap this way, where he goes down, left, and then up into the snakes. It doesn't accomplish any goals. All it does is let these snakes get free pot shots on him, and then here's the risk. If this army isn't here, what's to stop these units from just going right here? Oh, nothing. And then you've traded out the defensive posture and a good chunk of your workers for that. No need to do that to disrupt the economy, especially when your opponent, you're pretty sure you've got him pegged on what he's doing. So good play over here by AlphaZerton, and not really too much that faux therx can do. You can see that he wants to expand, but he doesn't really have the means to expand. This worker's going to be here pretty soon. He's going to discover this several-minute-old AlphaZerton wolf waiting for him, and this is a mark of the capabilities AlphaZerton has been pushing out across the map, that he has just recently let faux therx have an extra wolf to spare to send over that way. As the armor upgrade begins to finish, and by begins to finish, I mean begins to start, let's speed back up. Now, the worker ran away as soon as it saw the wolf that was right there, and this, faux therx actually gets a chance to move out, but we're going to see, I don't know if this is particularly efficient, and here's why. Now, this is actually, in my belief, a terrible engagement for, yeah, this is a bad engagement for a couple of reasons that I want to go into. So the first is that the third base is going to go up for faux therx. The second one is that the entire strategy thus far for AlphaZerton has been, I have a minimum number of wolves, absolutely necessary to defending the front line, and then my snakes out-damage you. But he walked his minimal number of wolves and a couple of snakes into a front line against a pretty heavy wolf front line, which I think is pretty poor. Another thing that faux therx unknowingly has going for him is that he was trying to expand, and his opponent attacked him what's a good time normally, but for AlphaZerton it's actually not a good time at all. AlphaZerton already had a more generally snake-heavy composition, and frankly, this worker kill he's going to get should not have been expected to be a reward, especially since faux therx was so clearly dominating in that fight, could have wrapped around if he had seen it, and then this worker would have been fine. Castle would have been 3/4 up by now. Another benefit here that faux therx has that AlphaZerton did not exercise is that AlphaZerton knows that he has gotten a pretty tech-heavy upgrade coming up, and he got that upgrade at pretty much the fastest time that you can. So why is he attacking right before it comes online? Now we say right before, we're going at halftime speed, but it was still about 20-30 seconds, but that is actually going to give faux therx a chance to swing back into this game. Also note that that attack right there wasn't made with the benefit of the upgrade, and didn't really let AlphaZerton take control and get his own third base. So it was actually a pretty staggering loss that evened things up that were otherwise not too shaky overall. Now, faux therx actually has run into the opposite problem, and this is why we're going to see... Oh, come on, do it. Yes, AlphaZerton, yes. He actually has to retreat, even though he has a numerical advantage here. Well, it looks like retreating. He's going back into this area, making sure that he can guard the third and the natural, but the fact that he doesn't have very many... I don't think he even has any wolves at all. He has one wolf. Where are you, token wolf? There you are. Are you going to kill that worker? Oh, yes. 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 Trading the worker kills like awesome. So the problem here is that throughout all of this, AlphaZerton has retained an advantage because of this defensive setup. That means he can move out on the map more aggressively. He can even take what is considered the traditionally riskier third base. Because look at this area. It makes sense given what the players involved have been working with. Remember that this base location over here has been blocked down and shut down and visibly seen, scouted, and denied by AlphaZerton. Faux therx hasn't been able to even get up this cliff. Even if he would, why would he? There's so much surface area that if he borders up his army up here to defend, well, walks right up into the natural, walks right into the third base. It's actually a terrible scenario. With the Sim City, that's actually being constructed out of wolves' dens, of all things, that AlphaZerton has going on, he can afford to defend his third base right here. Really, no decision is a terrible decision, but this is a little bit better. First off, if he's losing a fight here, he can run back to his natural, or this cliff, this choke right here, feel a little bit more secure. We're going to talk about this for a second. If he's fighting here, reinforcements from forwardly placed wolves' dens can more quickly reinforce AlphaZerton's army, not only because, well, defender's advantage, meaning that he can reinforce faster than faux therx can supply, but look at where faux therx's units are. They have to go all the way back from the main base and all the way back to the natural to even get to this point over here. Can you imagine these two dens and these two dens trying to reinforce this base? Jeez, it would take like 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds for the units to even get over there. So it makes more sense for him to pick this one because there is just a small gap between defending this and defending this. But because of the SimCity approach, the gap between defending this and defending this is very small when all of your units instantaneously pop out after their anointed build time in the place that is most easily going to cover two bases. Add the SimCity and the hill, this is a fantastic fallback point for AlphaZerton, which means it is clearly better than defending this unsim-cityed, double, not even chokeable third. For each their own. Now let's go over here. Now remember what we said earlier. Let's get on a stake. Oh yes, one armor. So here's the math behind actually that one armor figure that I was talking about. So snakes deal 1.3 damage. Rather, over 1.3 seconds, they deal, on average, 14 damage. It's going to take about 6 of those attacks to attack and kill another snake through the beast regen, so 6 times 1.3 seconds is 7.8 seconds, pretty much on the dot. Now, if you're up against a snake that has 1 armor, and you're a snake, then it's going to take 14 damage every 1.3 seconds, which means that you have to do... Rather, it's going to take 12 damage every 1.3 seconds, which means that you have to multiply that damage by 7, getting to 9.1 seconds, again cutting it very close. So there's the 1.3 seconds we were talking about. Now this superior snake count is fantastic for faux therx, but his less efficient snakes are going to have a problem, but not nearly as big of a problem that AlphaZerton has sprinkled in just a smattering of wolves. Now this convex, rather, he was trying to make is actually great. It means that a lot of damage is firing down and in, whereas not as much surface area is able to connect for AlphaZerton. He's going to have to back up here, otherwise he would lose this fight 10 times out of 10 times. And now that they're on the other side of this small choke created between the castle and this barrier right here, with the pull of some workers, he could have AlphaZerton gotten a surround up here and forced the back the other way. However, he has enough melee units and the advantage of having +1 armor. That means that even though he's going to take a couple of worker kills, he is going to clean this up, and therx is going to realize, wait a second, my stuff's dying a little bit faster. It's dying a lot faster. I'm getting out of here. Now, what was the shape of all of that? It's actually more lost for therx than it is for AlphaZerton. AlphaZerton has his third base, and in fact, he has even mined more than his opponent, who did get his third base up faster. The power of macro indeedly. Now we see the attack upgrades coming online, and attack upgrades make a lot of sense because while they're not as fantastic in snake versus snake fights, and definitely don't help as much with werewolves as armor does. You can shred buildings and defenses very easily. And also, if you upgrade sufficient numbers of attack, it will actually evaporate the front line that exists of wolves. Also, if you get armor on your snakes thinking, haha, I'm going to defend against the greatness that is the snake with my wolves, and maybe some werewolves, you would be correct. Unfortunately, there is a reality tunnel coming right towards you to smash you down, and that is that if you don't have attack upgrades and you have a bunch of wolf snake, when that first werewolf comes out, reality is going to hit you very, very hard. So therx actually putting up a watchtower over here, feeling that he has to defend, and he should. The reason being, look at this setup. This is actually fantastic for AlphaZerton. He has the lead in the upgrade race, and in the reasonably small numbers. We're not capped at 100-100 anymore. We're capped at 150-150, and that means that in these numbers, at about 80-90 supply, with these +2 upgrades, yeah, therx is very, very vulnerable, especially if he has no way of knowing this, but if AlphaZerton had attacked, he could have dealt a massive amount of damage, although it would have been a bit of an anti-timing over here as therx's own upgrades come online. So therx is actually going to try and attack here pretty soon as we boost back up to 1 times speed, 2 times the speed. Who can even play this fast? Only awesome people, I'm sure. Now, something we didn't mention before, but we're going to mention right now, right before a large attack happens. So there is one problem with the defenses that AlphaZerton had been putting up to far, which is he has his defensive army camped here. He has his reinforcements back here to defend his natural and his main base. He is reasonably sure, by the way, that his opponent is not getting dragons because of the large numbers of snakes that he has seen and that were attacking him earlier and the aggression with which they were attacking. So he's reasonably sure he's not up against any of those shenanigans. But why doesn't the snake army just run over and then down? Well, that's what this wolf is here for. See, this wolf is not here to defend anything. It is merely to observe. It is the watcher. If this large contingent of snakes moves up, north, and left, if in order to avoid this wolf, if they know about it, they would either have to attack the wolf and certainly give AlphaZerton vision, and with his superior upgrades, he could smash that army and deflect it easily. Or, if they knew it was there, they'd have to go all the way over to the left, down, and go in here. Again, at which point, the Sin City might be a little bit against AlphaZerton, but the upgrades certainly aren't. He can pull workers, and if it comes to it, his army is better upgraded, so he can win the base race by walking across the map himself. Also, he has more of a defensive holdout with these sitting right here. Now let's get into a fight. Anytime. No, Snake, no! You have so much to live for! Ah! Okay, he's dead. Now, that snake was actually to scout what his opponent had, to see what kind of damages he could do or could not do. And I'm sure therx took a look and said, +1 attack for me. +2 attack and +1 armor for you. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do this. And so he's actually going to go ahead and wait until he has his own upgrades. This is actually very, very common. You wait until your own upgrades are ready to go, and then you attack right after they come online. That way, you have the crisp knowledge of attacking when your upgrades are in, and you have just hit the most likely moment where you have upgrades and capabilities that your opponent can't match. And this is what we're going to see therx put out pretty soon. We're just waiting for the timer here to go. Come on. Okay. He's waiting. You know he's looking at this right here. He's looking so hard at this upgrade counter, just waiting. As the 4th base goes up and AlphaZerton is aware of it, he has a couple of choices. He doesn't know where his opponent's army is. He can guess that it's mostly snakes, but he can also feel comfortable that his opponent isn't doing anything like dragons or werewolves quite yet. Werewolves are certainly on their way to the next evolution, but if his opponent is going for a 4th base, best time to get your own base is when you're attacking. And so, it's not that he can be sure that an attack is coming, but this also tells him, hey, you can't kill the worker this time. You're going to want to consider getting your own 4th base pretty soon. So he can move out, or he can wait and expand. Unfortunately, he doesn't get to make that choice. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Oh, yes. Left, left. Good. So this is the large attack that we were talking about before. Now, there are a couple of ways that this is actually a really good situation for faux therx. First, he's getting his upgrades fairly soon. So he thinks this is a good time to attack. Also, his opponent is stacked in a vertical column, and his forces are more than capable of being deployed horizontally. And the reason this is good is that only a small contingent of the vertically stacked army of AlphaZerton is going to be able to respond to faux therx's army, while the full might of faux therx's army is going to be attacking at once. So good positions to take would be roughly here, and to wrap around here for faux therx. He could try and match column for column, but then he would be fighting an uphill battle and has the potential of losing vision at a bad time once the fight turns poor and not knowing what his opponent is doing. Also, if he's fighting up on this lower cliff right here, he doesn't know what forces, if any, AlphaZerton is swinging back around. So attacking on the high ground, in general, a good idea. Now, this is actually a really inefficient way for faux therx's army to take the fight. It is true he is on top of his opponent. His opponent is stacked terribly, but because it was an attack move, these units aren't going to bully through and mow through a portion of AlphaZerton's army. It's more like a couple of snakes are going to die as the warning salvo. Also, notice all of these snakes back here. These are the snakes that are doing damage. Maybe about 5. I would say maybe 10 at most snakes attacking, but the vast majority of the snakes are back here teetering around talking about, I don't know, what they're going to drink for dinner. They're not very imaginative, and neither am I. In the means, so while this is an advantageous position of horizontal up against vertical column, the T formation, this actual setup is not as good for faux therx as you would imagine it to be. That gives plenty of time for this horizontal to become horizontal. Unfortunately for faux therx, he attacked at an anti-timing. He attacked right when his upgrades hit, unaware of the fact that his opponents actually hit a couple seconds ago. Faux therx wanted to be in the middle of that fight while his opponent wasn't realizing that faux therx was going up in upgrades. What he didn't realize is that AlphaZerton actually went up. If we do the math calculations we were talking about before with the 1 armor, not only does AlphaZerton have a slightly larger snake count, but his snakes are going to die on average 1.5-ish seconds later than his opponent's 1 for 1. Scale that out by a bit, and we're going to see some problems pretty soon as faux therx is trying to defend this area from an attack that he himself started. He's almost certainly going to have to give up a lot of units. Look at the high ground abuse once again for AlphaZerton. It's not that faux therx couldn't see it, because he does have the castle and the vision up here, but it's that that was a very unfavorable trade. Upgrades overall seem pretty good. But now there's a 20 supply advantage for AlphaZerton, and all AlphaZerton has to do is relax. Have you ever been in this scenario? Oh, I don't know what to do. I think I just beat my opponent's army, and I'm feeling really good about myself, but I don't know what to do next. AlphaZerton's showing you how, man. Calm down. If you just defended a large enemy attack, then just build more stuff and go attack. And so Now, this is a really uncomfortable space for faux therx to be in. Look at where the army is positioned. It would be grossly inefficient in terms of surface area and what he would be facing off against, and the concave versus convex that he would be up against for faux therx to try and push up this side. Meanwhile, he can't really push along through the left portion here of his castle because of the sheer number of AlphaZerton's units. He's actually capable of using the castle as a buffer and saying, okay, I'm attacking this castle. Whichever way you swing out to defend it will either take too much time, or I will simply kill your army as it tries. If faux therx tries to cross with his units this way to attack this army, they're just going to get peppered as they're trying to get in position. Snakes don't have a lot of hit points, and these workers don't either, frankly, at these snake upgrades. So excellent position over here for AlphaZerton. All he has to do is play up the threat, and there we go. There's the cutoff we were talking about. Faux therx playing the dance right here, but this is actually a great positioning for AlphaZerton. He gets the nice crescent moon shape over his opponent's army. That's what they're playing around right here. That's actually the fourth dance that you're trying to see. So what's happening in this is that faux therx is trying to attack AlphaZerton's troops, and then let AlphaZerton's forces move cluster up in here so that they're mitigated. The range of them, their snakes only have range 3. They're not range intensive units. And then that way the full complement of therx's units are going to be attacking at the same time. Meanwhile, AlphaZerton is playing this game as well, but a Juggernaut has just dropped on the field, and its name is therx, the faux therx's werewolf. Now we're going to see why werewolves are pretty good. Notice that despite having no armor upgrades up against +4 armor snakes, faux therx's werewolf, it's taking a beating. And it's still taking a beating. It is actually a very powerful force on the battlefield. Unfortunately, the numbers advantage is just too massive right now. It is very important, I think, that AlphaZerton killed this werewolf before the next one joined the battlefield. Because once you get werewolves to numbers of 2 or 3, it becomes much harder to engage the army because they have that as a front line, and you frankly don't. However, the numbers just aren't here in faux therx's favor, and this werewolf is almost going to get stood in and ignored as it goes down. More of the reinforcements are coming in. Snakes are even flanking. A lone wolf is up on the front, and faux therx knows the end is coming. With 20 supply down, this castle is going to get obliterated. Big advantage of the attack upgrades we were talking about earlier. As that goes down, a 4th base has been up and running for a while now for AlphaZerton. He has all the gold he could possibly need. It's completely riskless, this base, because he's attacking his opponent up here, and the position means that only by ignoring his whole army and running down could faux therx have even tried to do any damage. Notice that despite, except for his natural, which only merited him about a worker and a half, and maybe a wolf. The wolf, which, by the way, was used for scouting. AlphaZerton was actually slower on the uptake during that entire game in terms of economy. He didn't have nearly as much gold as you would expect. You would expect a couple thousand gold stomp. Here he is, down 400 gold. But it's his defensive mindset and the enormous cost efficiency that he had going into the game. The way that he mapped it out perfectly, I'm going to use my buildings to defend so that I can have a small force and get snakes faster, so I can get upgrades so that my snakes will become dominant before your snakes are, and then I will simply grab my 3rd base and defend and then overwhelm you, if not with my upgrades, then with my freedom to move about the map. And really, once faux therx took a couple inefficient fights, AlphaZerton was able to stretch being behind in supply to being even in supply, and then once he was even a little bit ahead, getting a safety base and absolutely rolling over his opponent.